My mother wants my sister from my husband because I don't waste his money the way she thinks I should. But let's see what her dear yard dad thinks of all this. My mother believes that at 26, I am not good enough for my husband, Arthur, who is 34. She is trying to push my sister, Mercy, 24, towards him because she believes Mercy would be a better wife for him. Why? Because she knows how to handle men like him, handling them in the sense of extracting money from them, something I refuse to do. That's why she calls me useless because I don't spend his money. This isn't new. She has always given me cruel nicknames: useless, weird, fat, and many more. My mother never truly loved me or cherished me the way she did with my sister. I was the invisible daughter, the one who failed to meet her impossible beauty standards. I inherited my father's broad shoulders and strong build, while Mercy was my mother's replica, slim, delicate, and materialistic. Eventually, my sister joined in my mother's mockery. My father was the only one who defended me, the only one who saw me as his daughter. Whenever they laughed at me, my dad would stand up for me, argue with my mother, and scold Mercy. Sadly, he passed away in an accident when I was just 13. Losing him meant losing my best friend and greatest protector. His death also gave my mother free rein to unleash her full cruelty. She even blamed me for his death, saying it was my fault. He had stormed out of the house after a huge fight with her, one where she was forcing me to starve myself to lose weight. At my father's funeral, my mother didn't even hug me. That was the day I felt truly orphaned. After that, she made it clear that she wouldn't support me for free. If I wanted to stay, I had to do all the housework so she could work 2 jobs to provide for us. I understood. I had to take responsibility. But what about Mercy? She was 11, old enough to clean up after herself, but my mother insisted she was too fragile to do chores, as if the kitchen was some dangerous jungle full of monsters waiting to attack her. My father was gone. No one could stop her, so I had to endure it. Since she was feeding me, she felt no need to hide her hatred. She constantly reminded me that I was a disappointment, criticizing everything: my weight, my posture, my voice, even how I ate. She claimed I wasn't feminine. Mercy, on the other hand, received endless praise. My mother took pride in dressing her up, making sure she had beautiful outfits because she could pull them off, while I was given oversized shirts and clearance sale jeans. Complaining wasn't an option. She would just say, "Why waste money on a pig? Nothing looks good on you anyway, so what's the point?" I had to take care of the house, while Mercy was encouraged to socialize and enjoy life. She started dating at 13, while I didn't find anyone I liked until I was 19. My mother beamed with pride whenever Mercy came home boasting about her 3rd proposal of the month, or 5th, or whatever it was. When her boyfriends showered her with gifts, my mother would hug her, telling her how lucky she was to have such a beautiful daughter. Mercy's beauty became my mother's ticket to luxury. By the time my sister was 16, she was already dating college students and young professionals who spoiled her with expensive dinners and cash. My mother had no shame in taking a share and even encouraged Mercy to use her charm to get whatever she wanted. At 17, Mercy got pregnant. My mother took care of it before anyone found out, though it became an open secret in the family, one neither of them ever admitted. Despite everything, my mother was proud of her ability to manipulate men for financial gain. Meanwhile, I was ridiculed for being unable to do the same. They would sneer, "You're useless. No man will ever want you." But the more they insulted me, the more determined I became to escape. At 15, I started working at a cafe, which saved me from being a free maid at home. My mother didn't care, as long as I wasn't a burden and bought my own food. I saved every penny and counted the days until I could leave. Those 4 years at home after my father's death were a nightmare. I finally left at 17. At that same cafe, I met Arthur, my husband. He was new to the country and had no friends. He was a university student working part-time at the cafe. I helped him adjust to the job and the city. We became friends and started spending time together after work. One night, he invited me to his dorm, and I stayed. I was amazed by how intelligent people were and how big the world truly was. Arthur helped me discover my passion for cooking. I asked the cafe owner for a chance to bake, and little by little, I began learning how to prepare dishes professionally. At university, Arthur landed a well-paying job as a manager at a 5-star hotel. We stayed in touch, and I saved up from my job to enroll in culinary school. It was more than I had ever dreamed of because my only goal when taking that cafe job had been to escape my home. My mother and Mercy had no idea what I was doing. They assumed I was just a regular cook because I posted photos of my dishes online. They never knew how much I earned and simply assumed I was barely making ends meet. That worked in my favor. It meant they wouldn't ask me for money. While Mercy kept jumping from one boyfriend to another, leaving them financially drained, and my mother enjoyed the free ride, I was quietly building a life far away from them. I barely kept in touch, just a single call from my mother once a year. During one of those calls, she asked if I was dating someone. I told her yes, my former co-worker from the cafe. She assumed he was just some struggling waiter and laughed at the idea that I could attract someone valuable. I let her believe whatever she wanted. It was better to keep a low profile. Arthur and I dated for 5 years before getting married 2 years ago. I invited my mother and Mercy to the wedding as mere guests. The first shock came when they saw the wedding venue. My mother bombarded me with messages, demanding to know how I could afford such a place. Then she assumed I had spent all my savings on it. She texted, "Someone is so desperate to finally have a man say yes that she's breaking the bank for this wedding." I ignored her. Her surprise only made the moment more satisfying. But the real shock came when they saw Arthur and his family. Arthur is British, and his family is well off, something I hadn't even known in the early years of our relationship. My mother's jaw dropped, and her eyes lit up as if she had just won the lottery. Meanwhile, Mercy's expression soured and she remained in a bad mood throughout the event. She pulled me aside and asked, "Did you trap him with a pregnancy?" I was stunned by her words and just stared at her. That was her tactic, not mine. She continued, "Come on, let's be real. There's no way you got a man like him without a trick. What was it? Did you record something and blackmail him?" I laughed so hard I called Arthur over. "My sister wants to know how I tricked you into marrying me. She thinks I blackmailed you." Arthur chuckled and replied, "Want to know the trick? How about trying to love and care for your partner?" Mercy rolled her eyes and said she was just joking. After the wedding, my mother suddenly wanted to rebuild our relationship. She arranged multiple meetups, but I never attended. Then, one day, she showed up at our house unannounced. She was dazzled by the elegant interior and luxurious decor, but her enthusiasm faded when she saw me in my loose t-shirt and pajamas. "Your husband is well off. Why don't you dress nicely? Why don't you let him spoil you?" she asked. I replied, "I don't need to be spoiled. I can take care of myself." She didn't bother asking about my career. Instead, she was shocked that I still worked despite being married to him. "You should take a step back, enjoy life, and let your husband provide for you," she suggested. "Thanks for the advice, but no thanks," I responded. That angered her. "This is why I always called you stupid. You're wasting your fortune. He's your husband. You should take advantage of him." I ignored her, but she lost her temper. "If you actually cared about me, you'd help me out. But no, you only care about your stupid pride." She tried to manipulate me into squeezing money out of Arthur and giving her a cut. I shut her down immediately. "I'm not Mercy. Don't expect anything from me." She stormed out, yelling, "You don't deserve to be Arthur's wife." My daughter would be a better wife for him. At first, I brushed it off as one of her usual tantrums, but now I think it's more than just words. A month ago, Mercy showed up at Arthur's office just as he was about to leave. She claimed she had a flat tire nearby and needed a ride. He told her he'd be working late, but she insisted she could wait. She wore a dress with a high slit and a deep neckline, as if she had just come from a club. Arthur simply booked her an Uber and said, "Your ride's here." She stared at him, and when he added, "Don't worry, it's prepaid," she just left. As soon as she was gone, he called and told me everything. It was amusing, but also concerning. I mean, it's not normal for your sister to go after your husband, right? And it didn't stop there. Last week, we attended my cousin's wedding. Mercy showed up in an extremely revealing dress, openly flirting with Arthur whenever I wasn't around. She even asked him to dance. He firmly declined. That was my breaking point. I pulled her aside and made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate it. She just laughed and called me insecure. "Have you seen the men I've rejected? They're better than your husband. Why would I even be interested in him?" She sneered. I smirked. "If that's true, why are you wasting your time with him, especially when he doesn't seem interested in you?" My mother joined in, mocking me. "You're acting so important. But honestly, it would have been better if Mercy were his wife. At least she would support her own mother financially, unlike you." Later, I told Arthur everything, and he just laughed. I trust my husband completely. He knows their games and wants nothing to do with them. He finds my mother and Mercy pathetic and assures me they have no power over our relationship. But I don't want to be naive either. I refuse to let them poison what I've built. I need to do something to keep them away, permanently, and I'm definitely ready. I had to go through with it, for my marriage and our happiness. As expected, Mercy arrived wearing an outfit that left little to the imagination. Honestly, what she wore that night and the photos she sent to my husband, no real difference. I had invited everyone with a +1, but Mercy came alone, clearly wanting to appear single. Only I knew that she was never truly single. At any given time, she had at least 4 men wrapped around her finger. She walked in, hugged Arthur, and wished him a happy birthday. Her perfume was so overpowering that it could probably be smelled from space. During dinner, she accidentally spilled water on herself, making her dress even more revealing. She wanted attention, and she got it, but not from Arthur. Instead, she became the center of whispers and judgmental glances. She thought she looked seductive with her wet, see-through dress. If only she realized our guests were sophisticated, not the type of cheap men who admired that kind of desperation. After dinner, I stood up and announced a special presentation for Arthur's birthday. The screen lit up with photos and videos from his childhood, laughing, playing, growing into the man I love. Everyone adored it. His parents and Arthur himself got emotional over the sweet memories. Then I smiled and added, "Who would have thought this little boy would grow up to be so successful and charming that a woman would literally rip her clothes for him?" Laughter erupted, except from Mercy. My mother's face turned red. I continued, "Yes, even my own mother thinks I'm not good enough for him. Why? Maybe because I'm not as beautiful, or maybe, just maybe, because I don't know how to drain a man's bank account." The room reacted in mixed ways. Some laughed, others turned to see my mother and Mercy's expressions. Some simply looked confused, as if thinking, "What is happening?" Still, I kept my tone light. Now, before we wrap up, I have one more thing to share. Lately, Arthur has been receiving a lot of female attention. The screen flickered, revealing screenshots of explicit messages and photos sent from Mercy's fake accounts. Of course, I had censored the most obscene parts. There were no children at the party, but still. However, I made sure her distinctive neck tattoo was completely visible. Mercy screamed and ran toward the screen, trying to block it. But that only made people notice the tattoo more. She tried to speak, but I didn't let her. "Oh, I know what you're thinking," I said. "Is that my sister? Because the tattoo says yes. But no, it's not her. She claims that maybe her bitter ex-boyfriend manipulated her photos and sent them to my husband from multiple fake accounts. After all, she thinks she's far too gorgeous to ever be interested in her own sister's husband." I smirked and continued, "I mean, just look at her. Perfect figure, flawless skin. Maybe some of you think she would make a better wife for my handsome husband, just like my mother always says. And let's not forget, she's an expert when it comes to handling men's bank accounts. Mercy had no choice but to leave. Her embarrassment was so intense that her face turned a deep red. Not a great match with her tattoo, if you ask me. As for my mother, she couldn't leave. Her boyfriend was too interested in learning more. She stepped forward, trying to stop me, waving her hands as if to dismiss everything as a joke. I ignored her. She was furious, trembling with rage, and whispered, "You're humiliating us. Stop this nonsense immediately." I ignored her again, and I simply responded, "I'm just presenting the truth. The truth can never be humiliating, at least not for me, because I have done nothing shameful." I remember every word I said that night because I spent hours crafting the perfect speech. It was so satisfying that I've rewatched the video a million times. I presented evidence that my mother had also been seeing other men. Her partner at the party did not take it well. The whole room fell silent, shocked. It was clear now. This was no joke. I was exposing my own family. Some guests glanced at Arthur. I clarified, "I'm lucky to have found a wonderful husband who respects my concerns and stands by me." Finally, years of pain and frustration overwhelmed me, and I broke down in tears. Arthur embraced me, and his parents joined in, supporting us. My mother's boyfriend stormed out in fury, and she rushed after him. Thankfully, after all that, the party carried on. Arthur's parents even thanked me. Apparently, birthday parties in England are usually boring, just tea and snacks, never live entertainment. So despite the spectacle, they found the whole situation rather amusing. However, they were not amused by my mother and sister. Once we shared the full story with them, they were furious. The idea that my own family tried to manipulate Arthur or his family for money disgusted them. Arthur and I felt victorious. If public humiliation was the only way to rid ourselves of them, so be it. Even some extended relatives reached out to offer their support. They were horrified that my own mother had tried to destroy my marriage, just for money. A week later, I got a message from my mother's now ex-boyfriend. He wanted to meet. I agreed. He got straight to the point. "After the party, your mother and sister tried to convince me that you were mentally unstable, just seeking attention, and even medicated. I know that's not true, but how much of what you said that night was really true?" I wasn't surprised. That was classic behavior from them. I smiled. "And what do you think?" He hesitated before replying. "I think I'd like to hear the full story." So I pulled out my phone and sent him a link to my original post in this thread. "I won't defend myself," I told him. "You can read this and decide for yourself." Yesterday he called me again. "I broke up with her. You were right. Your mother sees men as walking ATMs. In just a few months I've spent thousands on her demands, while she was sleeping around with other men. Thank you for saving me from wasting years on a woman like that." I simply replied, "You're welcome. And since I know he'll be reading this, you owe me a big favor for saving your wealthy behind." Update 2. Things got interesting. With my mother's boyfriend gone, she lost her primary source of income. Normally, breakups bring heartbreak. But in their case, what broke was their bank accounts. Now she had to rely on Mercy to share whatever money she got from her schemes. The problem? Mercy had dumped all her boyfriends in her pathetic attempt to chase after my husband. She could have easily gone back to her usual tricks if I hadn't exposed her. My extended family and acquaintances took the party story and ran with it. Mercy already had a reputation for dating wealthy men and draining them. But the fact that my mother used her as a financial tool, that was juicy gossip. Some guests even recorded my entire presentation and shared it. At some point, it ended up on Facebook. I saw it much later, and honestly, it didn't bother me one bit. It has since been deleted. I assume someone reported it. But for my mother and Mercy, this whole thing was a disaster. Then my mother showed up at my house, screaming and insulting me for ruining her reputation, which was hilarious because did she really have a reputation to ruin? At least not one worth saving. Luckily, my husband was home. He gave her the get lost she so desperately deserved, without even needing to use foul language. He told her exactly what she needed to hear, and even threatened to call the police if she ever showed up at our house again. Since then, we've been completely free from these women. I hope this peace lasts. Update 3. So, you all want an update on my mother? I've seen her new nickname in the comments, the Queen of Gold Diggers. Well, let's get to it. Her sugar stepfather, the man funding some of her expenses, is livid about everything she did to him. She manipulated him into buying new furniture for her home, forced him to take her to expensive restaurants every week, and worst of all, she wasn't even faithful to him. So, yeah, I'd say he has plenty of reasons to be upset. That's why he called me asking if I had any proof that my mother was offering her own daughter to older men in exchange for gifts. Because when I told him the full story, I didn't hold back. And you know what? I had proof. Not just of the gifts given to Mercy, but also to my mother. Because apparently, Mercy told her suitors they had to keep her mother happy if they wanted to stay in her good graces. Part of the bullying I suffered growing up included her constantly bragging about her success, if you could even call it that, by sending me photos of the gifts she got and detailed messages boasting about them. So, after some digging, I found more than enough evidence and sent it all to her ex. I also agreed to testify in court. A man of his age, with enough wealth to fund my mother, obviously had connections. And sure enough, he knew someone in the prosecution office. An investigation into my mother was opened immediately. And by immediately, I mean much faster than most legal processes take. The only reason it moved so quickly? Because the evidence proved my mother was essentially pimping out her own daughter. It's insane what an angry, wealthy, and well-connected person can accomplish in a short time. During the trial, it was proven that my mother helped Mercy find these men. While there was no direct exchange of money for sex, there were plenty of expensive gifts. And in a few cases, these men did give Mercy money for various reasons. It wasn't a textbook case of trafficking, but it was severe enough for my mother to be sentenced to 5 years in prison. I testified, backing up the messages from my sister that proved everything they had been doing. Mercy sobbed and begged the judge not to take her mother away. Meanwhile, my mother snapped at her, screaming for her to shut up because it was her own messages that landed them in this mess. After the sentencing, Mercy tried to shift the blame onto everyone but herself. We shut her down immediately. Then she lunged at us in a fit of rage, trying to shove us. Unfortunately for her, there was a court officer standing right there who immediately arrested her for contempt. She was locked up for 24 hours. That night, we slept peacefully, knowing that, for at least one night, we were completely free of them both. Still, we went ahead and filed a restraining order against Mercy. Not that we've needed it. For the past 2 weeks, she's been radio silent. She's probably too busy scrambling to cover my mother's living expenses. Because if we define work as conning men out of their money, then, well, let's just say she's currently unemployed. I'm considering taking a break from posting. This will probably be my last update. The only reason I'd ever return? If my mother gets out of prison and decides to join a biker gang. But hey, that's 5 years from now, and who knows where I'll be by then.